Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Laura from PleiadianHealer.com, and today I actually want to talk about something that may be coming up for a lot of people right now, and that's the topic of mental illness, mental disease, and mental disorders. So I'm just gonna show the screen right here, and I want to discuss depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, ADHD, Tourette's, and also a few more such as personality disorders. Now, I do know I had a video like a few years ago that already talked about a few of these things, but this just added insights and a bit more information on certain aspects. Let's put it that way. I also want to start off saying I'm not a licensed professional, clinician, psychotherapist, or psychiatrist. So every single thing in this video is my own personal opinion. All right. So energetically, why is mental illness running so rampant? I really do think that the astral right now is similar to the Wild Wild West. It has definitely gotten worse from 2020 and on. I personally don't remember seeing it like this in 2017 or even 2018, which at this point even seems like the good old years. It's not even that long ago. It's like 5, 6, 7 years ago. With the astral realm, the panic kind of set in 2020, when everything just turned upside down. The world seemed to be in utter chaos, and I'm pretty sure the world in and of itself is still in a form of chaos. Nowadays, it's just the new normal or whatever they want to push on us. So it's very hard to work through that. And people who are energetically attuned, such as I am, such as many other people who are most likely following this channel, call them empaths or just people who've trained their energy to be that way, we can very easily pick up on that. And so there are several ways they want to get to us. By they, I mean the astral entities, call them the matrix controllers, call them whatever. They really want to get to us through the mental, physical, and emotional body, and also the psyche, which is soul. The psyche, meaning the soul, is literally what I work on during my sessions. And during those, a lot of it has to do with calling back soul pieces, which are scattered all over the astral realms, removing entities, removing AI, removing grids, cords, intrusions, all of that. However, all these bodies, so the mental, physical, and emotional and soul body, they're all related and connected. And it's worth mentioning in this video. I think I also mentioned that in the physical disease video, which I'll link in this one. So that's the one where I was talking about how physical disease manifests through all these layers. So cancer, chronic Lyme, all those chronic illnesses have been on the rise supposedly, and a lot goes into that, obviously. The mental, emotional, physical body, and also the soul they're all related in a way that if you feel depressed or anxious, you can definitely feel it on the physical, mental, emotional level. And this even has causes in the diet, the food, alcohol. So let's just take depression as an example. I think it's pretty normal to feel down every once in a while, but depression takes these things deeper and to another level. So what I've personally noticed when I was still younger, as you guys know, I grew up in Europe where the drinking age was 16 at that point. And obviously we drank way younger than that because that's just how you do it. But basically when I was younger, when I was a teenager and in my late teens, early 20s, we used to go out, we used to drink. But what I felt with the experiencing this concept of a hangover, which I'm pretty sure every single person has experienced at one point who used to drink, I would automatically feel depressed the day after. And I strongly believe that hormonal balance, or rather imbalance, has a lot to do with that. Alcohol is a depressant. It can also lead to violence for some people. And I feel a lot of that has to do with the entities working through people who've drinking alcohol. Some people say, tequila is worse for them, or vodka is worse for them. So it just really depends. But it's these spirits working through the alcohol and then latching onto people. And alcohol is also toxic for our bodies. That's why you need to puke when you've had too much of it. You experience a rash sometimes, and the entire concept of being drunk, it's very toxic for your body. So I do feel things like alcohol for sure can definitely trigger a depression in some people, especially if it's always on and off. You know, you have the concept of binge drinking in certain countries, like UK was the front runner with that. Not sure if they still are. And you have all these things where people just get drunk and drunk and drunk, and then they're always depressed the next day after. And it's like a normal cycle for some, but it really isn't normal. It's similar to obesity and how obesity can lead to mental illness, depression, anxiety as well. Which is basically just inflammation of the body, you know. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into all of this. In addition to, you know, environmental factors such as the water, air, the food, possibly alcohol, possibly people even taking substances like smoking pot or just hard on party drugs. In addition to all of that, we're also speaking about the machine theory, which watch that video if you haven't yet, which could very well be regulating our emotions, thoughts, and triggering a full-on depression, panic attack, or even schizophrenia in some. And then, of course, you have the entities attaching to us from other people and beings. And I had this happen when I experienced a very severe form of anxiety for almost 2 years straight, which I'll go into in this video too. So let's take a look at some of the most common mental illnesses. You have depression, anxiety, Tourette's, schizophrenia, personality disorders, autism, ADHD. And with a lot of this, especially with ADHD, depression, anxiety, I really feel our nervous system is obviously on overload right now. With ADHD, we are seeing more of that right now because we are constantly bombarded with notifications, EMF rays, and radiation, having to check our phones, computers, screens all the time. Do you actually remember the good old times when you were able to relax and just let the computer sit in the corner for weeks, or you didn't even have a computer at home? Maybe some people even remember those times. I actually do, because I didn't get my first laptop when I think it was 18 or 19, right after high school, before I entered college. So I do remember those times where you weren't always on. You know, you didn't always have to check something. My generation had their first cell phone when they were younger, that's true. But, you know, I'm pretty sure a lot of people still remember those times where cell phones weren't even a thing, really. So those are the good old times, as I like to call them. It's probably been a while, but jobs used to look very different too. You know, you literally had jobs where not much was really demanded from you. You know, a lot of these old school office jobs, which were very clerical, you didn't have to have a million skill sets. You didn't have to have a knowledge of graphic design, of all these office suites they want you to know, like everything they want the kids to know nowadays. It's kind of ridiculous compared to like 20 or 30 years ago. So it's really just become a battlefield these past few years and decades, demanding more and more from the workers and having to be on full call all the time. I do think the way things are being diagnosed has also changed, adding to all of this, but it's no surprise that more kids especially have ADHD or ADD. And I keep saying it over and over again, don't give these kids a cell phone, a tablet, or a computer until they're well into their teenage years or even 18 years old. Just the radiation coming from these tablets and devices, in addition to, you have the issue of the trafficking, you know, the sex trafficking going on social media where they're trying to groom teenage girls, and also in real life, but it's definitely happening on social media. Plus the idea that the frontal lobes and brains are still fully developing way past that age, even up until you're 30 years old. It calls for a complete disaster trying to give these teenagers a device, right? So I can't believe that some parents give their babies these things, or even when their children are 10 years or younger. And I personally don't think it's smart, for many reasons, like I just mentioned. Even me personally, I know I don't have ADHD, by the way, but I personally even feel I'm experiencing some of these symptoms, especially when I don't have a to-do list. So I think the concept of having a to-do list and writing things down, and also just putting things in your calendar, helps. They're pushing this ADHD onto a lot of people. And people who already have a nervous system overload, it's no surprise that they're experiencing it. And when some people have to take the meds, meaning the pharmaceutical drugs, these just call in more entities, by the way, and they really also mess with people's energy fields, call it aura. I said it in a previous video, but basically they're dimming down the light and the shine, and people really become a very dimmed down version of themselves, in addition to having all these entity attachments when you take those things. And I also keep seeing entities right here beneath the eye. So it's kind of like where you would put an eyeshadow with a woman, for example. It's kind of like it's an overlay over the eyes. That's how I see it. And I typically see that in people's pictures. So I know one of my older friends, we used to be friends, we're not friends anymore. He had severe ADHD, and he's probably at this point in his late 40s, early 50s. And he had ADHD his entire life. It ran in his family. His sister had it, everything. But I definitely think it was triggered more by the current climate, because he also works in advertising, which is basically complete hell if you have ADHD, because you always have to have your laptop with you, you have to be on call all the time, almost like a doctor, but with no benefits, no financial benefits in that sense. So he started taking ADHD meds 3 or 4 years ago. And I started looking at his pictures because he would post pictures online on social media. And I would all of a sudden see this entity over his eyes, which wasn't there before, by the way, because I've known this person for 10, 15 years at this point. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy what the meds do to these people. And also, he just seemed so slow. He seemed like his entire dim and shine was gone. You know, how people sometimes pick up on your energy field, like your body obviously vibrates at a certain frequency. And I felt that his body wasn't really vibrating at that frequency anymore. Vibrating meaning everything has frequency, even the clothes you wear, which I really want to discuss in another video, and how synthetic clothing is pretty harmful for your own energy field and all of that. But yeah, I could definitely see it in this person. I've also seen it in others who took other types of medications. So it's very interesting when you actually energetically are able to see that and tap into that. Now, with autism, I feel it mostly does have to do with environmental factors. For example, what's being injected in these babies or kids from a very early age on. Of course, the food, radiation, etc., all of that too. I don't really want to talk much about autism in this video because you do tend to get censored when you raise awareness with all of that. But I also feel it's DNA damage due to everything that I just mentioned, which can be reversed, by the way, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And have you also noticed more and more autism normalization videos? So when you go on YouTube and you know how these videos pop up in your feed, oh, suggested for you, you might like this, especially from 2021 and on, I've noticed on my own feed, which I'm not really that interested in these topics, but I noticed more videos by these huge channels that all of a sudden just blow up, and they're not related to spirituality or anything. But these people are talking about, oh, I'm autistic, and this is how I self-diagnose myself, or I have ADHD, and this is what you can do. So I noticed both ADHD and autism channels just blowing up over these past 2 or 3 years. And also how these huge autism channels claim how more people have it than you think they do, and how you can take a quiz and see if you have it. So in my opinion, they're trying to normalize it. They're also trying to normalize it with making our food, air, water more crap. And of course, with the most recent, 2020, 2021 agenda and the DNA damage, that could have been caused by the people taking the what, which I believe that thing is also the cause we're seeing more and more mental illness cases in the media and people overall turning crazy these past few years. So it's a mix of these entities really messing with these people, and then perhaps also their personality just having been so complacent, possibly fractured. So way too fractured to really, deal with the world nowadays, because people who kind of follow all these agendas, oh, we have to wear our face thingies, we have to take the what's. I mean, I know some people obviously are able to wake up from all of that, and I know a lot of people who got it who are now really questioning their reality. But for those people, which you still see way too many on the street, even today, I think I saw this woman with a mask on. I'm like, why are you still wearing them? It was so bizarre. So for those people who really don't know what's going on, I feel the world is just so scary right now. Once you kind of see through it and you're seeing these are the steps they're taking to turn our world into AI, to really tear people down, to really destroy their mental illness, to destroy their physical bodies. you're kind of okay, because you see, of course, you're still affected by the mandates. We all were, but you see through it, and it makes you stronger to kind of stand in your power and stand your ground. Whereas with these other people who are just following one agenda after another, the world might be very scary right now because they're really being pushed from one agenda into the next, right? Like I always like to say, if you have a stable center, you don't sway left or right, but they might just be utterly confused at this point. Okay, depression, hormonal balance, or rather hormonal imbalance caused by several things. Of course, genetics can be one of those, but I feel it's also more environmental, including like the alcohol and hangover story that I told, and the food, water, and air. Depression is also entities around people, by the way. So if you're always eating junk food or crappy food, it doesn't even have to be junk food. Like you don't have to eat McDonald's or Burger King, but any food that's pretty mainstream right now that's not organic or not coming from an organic farmer, it may have an effect on your mental health. I literally bought something from Trader Joe's the other day, and it said no hormones in this. And then the way my body was reacting to it, I think it was just something simple like ice cream. I knew it had hormones in it. So you literally can't believe anything that these huge corporations say on their package and in their nutrition slips. So the energy of a place that people are connecting with can also cause depression. And I'm saying that because I've moved plenty of times in my life, including my time here in New York City. I've lived in places where people who were living there before, let's just say I was subletting this place from someone else, so I actually met them in person, and I knew they were depressed and they were anxious, that I had a form of anxiety. And I also knew from one person, at least one person who I subletted a place from, that she was on meds because of that too. So these were people who were occupying the space beforehand. And it's so important to clear your space regularly. And if you have a house, same with the land. In apartment buildings, it's more about clearing your apartment, because you obviously can't clear the entire building, although you could try. But one time when I was moving this one time, and it was the person who had these severe, depressive episodes and everything, who I took over the place. I had to clear it like every 2 weeks for months to get rid of that giddy energy. So I just want to put that out there too. It can be things around you, like the astral entities trying to get to you. It can be the food you're eating, like if you're always experiencing hangovers the day after, all of that. But it can actually also be the energy in the space that you're occupying. And especially if someone else was in it before, or if you're living with a person, you might be picking up on their heavy energy too. In addition, it's also being a targeted individual, and these astral entities just throwing a whole bunch at you, or us in general, such as, you being bullied in school, you're not finding or connecting with your tribe, you're ostracized by others from an early age on, you're made fun of by others. So I do think depression is pretty common in teenagers due to the reason mentioned above. And I remember, I personally, for sure, I've experienced it from 14 years old, like when I was a teenager, for sure. I had it. I also know some of my friends had it. And I felt it just got much better in my 20s when I was able to see through all of this. And also, the more you're able to just kind of create the life that you want, the more you're able to break out of your environment. Like for me, it really was moving from my place in Germany to New York City that kind of gave me that boost. And I don't think I've ever really had depression here in the city, because for me, it was just so life-changing. So I know it's not going to be that extreme for some people, but it might be. Also screen time. They're trying to suck the creativity from us by us having to sit in front of screens all the time. Think laptop, TV. Being in front of those can literally make you feel depressed, as I've noticed. I sometimes sit in front of the computer all day long because I'm working on something. I'm like, wow, I feel so down. I literally feel like parts of me were just kind of sucked into the screen or whatever. Another thing that has increased from 2020 and on was the remote work, which I'm not entirely opposed to remote work. I don't really like the concept of going into an office. I mean, if some people like that, sure. But what have they done with this entire remote work? Really put people in front of screens, and that can cause a whole lot of these disorders. In the worst cases, you really are having entities trying to animate you to take your own life. So I talk about that in the suicide video that I had a few months ago. And most of those thoughts that you're experiencing, by the way, are really not your own, which I also have that video on how thoughts are basically psychic attacks. Not all of them, but especially a lot of these lower ones, really negative ones. I experiencing them all the time too, but I can just see through it at this point because I'm like, I know I would never talk to myself in that way, that they're trying to push it on me. Okay, to anxiety, similar factors, but I feel for sure with anxiety, especially generalized anxiety disorder, which is GAD, entities working through other people and the astral to get to you. So I'm going to tell you a short story. When I was 20 years old, I dated this guy. He was older than me. And you would think, they have more experience, they're nicer, they're kinder, but no, this guy had so many issues. Like, we're talking about real issues. He was still in his 20s, so he's still younger, but he already had a nose job done. He was thinking about getting Botox done. He had a leg job, which I thought was really extreme for a guy. And he just had so many things done on his body to modify his body. I think he had so many disorders. He was definitely a narcissist. He had so many insecurities where I think he had body dysmorphia. So he just had so many disorders. And basically, he hated his natural body. He even wanted me to get like a nose job, all of those things done. And I'm like, okay, the moment he suggested those things for me, I was out. So it was only one semester that we were dating, luckily, but he caused so much damage to me and also all the others around us. So we were part of this clique. And it was such a short time. So you're really talking about people ruining your life for a long time. This was my one scenario where I can for sure say he was trying to ruin my life for the longest time. And I was still feeling it for like at least 2 years after this. Now, this is only dating him for 4 months or so. Just imagine actually being married to a person like this, or having this person as your parent or whatever, how these people can really ruin your life. Some people are like, oh, every person is worth the same and all of that. I kind of disagree. I think some people are literally AI and they're just sent into this world to cause the most destruction. I'm not just talking about background clones or whatever. I'm talking about legit clones in our life, which I want to mention in another video because it's really extensive. So after breaking it off, I personally had severe anxiety for almost 2 years. And it was so severe that my entire stomach area, so it's kind of where the gut area is, the solar plexus, which is when you work in the gym, you have like the solar plexus machine where you're basically just crunching up to work that area, exactly there. And I want to call it a generalized anxiety or similar. I was 20 years old. I was too afraid to do anything. I was too afraid to really participate in life, to even step out of my door. I had to force myself to step out of my front door and actually participate in life, or actually go out into the world and do things. And I felt it was just called on by him. It was a major life crisis in my life. We go through stages to make us stronger. I do agree with you, but I would not want to wish this particular experience on anyone. In addition to him fitting the description of a complete narcissist, he probably also had just a random personality disorder and way more issues. Had I personally known about breathing exercise or other techniques back then, it would have been better and I would have been better off too. But those just were different times. You didn't have inspirational YouTube channels. You didn't really have the yoga culture thrown at you the way that you do now. That didn't even come until I felt like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later. Or maybe I personally just wasn't interested in it at that point. So I had to cope with it. And it really took a while to get better. And I think once I started doing some breathing exercises like a year later or so, yeah. So also leaving my old life behind really helped. So I feel anxiety is nervous system overload for some people, as discussed. I also feel it's past life memories. So if you have a phobia, like the fear of spiders or deep water, all of that could have been how you died in a past life or how you were tortured in a previous life, which they're all playing out in the parallel, as cliche as it sounds. And that's why you're tapping into those things, right? And then we're going to move on to Tourette. Tourette's in the most severe cases are for sure entities, depending on how severe it is. Another personal story. So I was living in Sydney. This was back in 2019. I was living in this apartment complex. Everyone had their own little studio. But even there, like even in Sydney, the walls were very, very thin. That's the first thing I noticed. Like here in New York, the walls are thickish, at least with the older constructions, but in Sydney, they were really thin in that particular apartment complex. And um, so we were living there. There was this random girl who kind of came. I think the apartment next to me was rented out as an Airbnb. So you always had these various different people just coming and leaving. And this one day, this girl arrives and she ended up staying for 2.5 weeks, which was a lot because she had this condition. So, because the walls were so thin, I had my bed here and she had her bed kind of on the other side of the wall. You could hear everything. And her tic was so bad that she would basically have this screaming or hiccup thing every few seconds, multiple times every minute. And when she had that, she even had it when she was sleeping. So for 2.5 weeks straight, I was basically severely attacked in my sleep. Think nightmares, think migraines, and other types of psychic attacks. Since I was energetically attuned back then, it was easy for me to pick up on what was going on. I actually have no idea how the other neighbors were coping because obviously there were neighbors on the other side of her and also around us. So I personally cleared my space every day at this point. Tourette also has a past life relation. So what I got with her was that she had been persecuted and she had died in a traumatic way sometime in the medieval ages. And her Tourette personally was very severe. I know with other people, it's not as severe. They only have a tic here and then, but with her, she literally had a tic every few seconds. It was kind of like this, it was so bad. Like I envision that for 2.5 weeks straight, every 5 to 10 seconds. And you kind of get the idea of everyone turning half crazy, and it would get worse because some neighbors, at first we didn't know what was going on, right? We were like, what is this person getting murdered? Like, what's going on? So the neighbors called the cops on her. And when that happened, her tic actually got worse. So it definitely gets worse under stressful situations. And I feel it's just a mix of things. But everyone was just really happy when she was gone after 2.5 weeks, as bad as it sounds, because it was so disruptive to everyone's life, honestly. And so I personally did pick up on the entities around her because they were trying to get to me. I do feel a lot of these disorders, especially if they are severe. So some of these disorders aren't as severe, right? But if they are, they do have this past life component to them. Think personality disorders. If you go back to how ludicrous these kings and queens were in the medieval ages, I say Middle Ages, which is similar, or even thousands of years ago, you think about them like just a random Roman person torturing their slaves, or the nations that became slaves, all of that. A lot of these people, a lot of these leaders, a lot of these kings and queens, they probably would have qualified as having some sort of personality disorder or mental disorder at this point in nowadays times. And so if these people just keep reincarnating over and over again, and they keep that soul remembrance with them in their body and their DNA, it's actually no wonder we're dealing with a real zoo and clown world these days. With dependent personality disorder, like for example, Catherine the Great, or there was this other queen, I think her name was Queen Anne from the 1800s, being dependent upon servants, right? So if they were to be reincarnated in nowadays times, they would probably have a dependent personality disorder. They wouldn't want to do things like they would want to be chauffeured around by their parents, just those things. Or, when some people just stomp their foot on the ground, like that's literally how people used to act in the medieval ages. So not getting your way. I also feel personality disorders can be triggered and made worse with child abuse. So actually being beaten as a kid or abused in a very severe way. And every kid reacts to that differently. So you have some children that they're still going to experience trauma from that, but they're going to be okay. And other children are literally going to be so fractured that they're going to have all these issues and maybe a personality disorder once they grow up. All right, one more. We're going to do schizophrenia. I like to call this natural MK Ultra. People are very ungrounded, and mostly during their schizo episodes, which they don't experience all the time, by the way. They're literally tapping into all the astral dimensions around them, and also what these astral entities around them are trying to push onto them. There's this one YouTube channel, I believe they're called living with schizophrenia, which I also mentioned in one of my most recent YouTube lives. They have great content on what these episodes look like. And if you look at the comments on this channel, which I think they have, what, 250,000 subs at this point, or 500, I don't know. They have a lot. So they get a lot of comments from people who can relate to this. People are always commenting about how the person they know has schizophrenia, how this person actually turns into a military officer or gives military orders, such as like during a drill. And this actually makes sense. To me, it makes a lot of sense because it's all natural MK Ultra. And these entities, they're all connected to the military and all these institutions. And this could be a way of acting through them, you know. So MK Ultra could be part of the entire military experiment, which is government controlled. And so it's all just related, if that makes sense. You know, you have the CIA and all of that working with it. So it's just all the same branch, and doesn't matter which country you're in. And so that they're picking up on that is actually interesting with the entire military terminology, because it just confirms that they're controlled by something. And as a normal person, you are able to experience the same thing when you take psychedelics. So when you're on a psychedelic trip, I'm not talking about microdosing on shrooms, but actually taking the full-on doses, for example. When people say they had a bad trip, which I personally don't think there's something like a bad trip. I think every trip is able to show you something. But unfortunately, during these trips, especially 2020 and on, a lot of entities try to get to you. And that's why people have these suicidal thoughts and everything after that. But during a bad trip, which some of my friends actually told me about, it seemed they were being watched by this higher power, such as a military or some type of surveillance technology. And that makes a lot of sense because they're tapping into the same realm the schizophrenic people are. So I think those trips are similar to episodes, but I also wondered how the people function in real life, because when you're on one of the psychedelic trips, which lasts anywhere from like 4 hours to 8 hours or however long you want it to be, I mean, you can't do anything. You can't pay your bills. You can't work a job really. You can try. You can't even really drive a car. So when you just kind of imagine someone who's schizophrenic, they have this episode and they have it constantly or a lot of times, yeah, it's really going to do a number in their life, right? Leaves you ungrounded. For me, example, I can't imagine being on a train or subway. That would probably be the worst trip or experience of your life. And overall, the astral realm has become absolute clown world, clown meaning AI world. So trips nowadays, or these possibly even schizophrenic episodes, they're really not what they used to be in 2018 and before too. I just wanted to put that out there. And it's no wonder a lot of these schizo people are being triggered right now. And of course, you also have the obsession with schizophrenic people. So they like to obsess on one thing over and over again. You can also have that during a trip, by the way. You know, when you see people taking psychedelics, they're really fascinated with a mirror and they stare into the mirror for like hours straight. That would be an example of that obsessive behavior. And you have that with schizophrenic people too. And on the channel that I mentioned, there was this interview with a psychiatrist who is actually promoting the ketogenic diet as medicine, so natural food as medicine, but that it wouldn't work until well into 3 months and longer to take any type of effect, and that there couldn't be any cheat days for it to work either. So food can act as medicine and play a role, but you just have to consume the right one. And we're really not giving that type of knowledge and information in school, the mainstream college, etc. All right. In short, I think that's what I had to say about mental illness or dis-ease, meaning making people feel uneasy. Of course, you could write books on this topic, but I feel this could be a good energetic overview. Some people commented saying they think schizophrenic people have parasites in their brain or even body or energy. I'm not so sure about it. I think it depends on the case. I do think entities are controlling them for sure. And I think a lot of them are just not aware of that, or they're really just acting, these entities are acting through these people to get to others. And they're also trying to do that with normal people, you know, like you and I. But if you know what's going on, it's just not going to be possible. Whereas with schizophrenic people or other type of people who are mentally impacted, They're just not aware of that, and they don't have those high boundaries up and high shields up because they're experiencing all these episodes. So these entities are trying to control us. They're more successful with the more vulnerable people, ADHD, depression, suicidal beings too. Sure, maybe some of us are more targeted from the start, as we all know. Most of us are targeted at this point anyhow, but it's important to keep your sanity nowadays, because your mental health, in addition to your physical and emotional health, which it all runs into one, it's one of the most important assets you can have. You need to strengthen that the same way you strengthen your body and your energy. So you need to do that every single day. You know, some people go to the gym every single day. You need to strengthen your mental and energetic health every single day too. If I don't put my shields up regularly, I can feel it. I can also see it in my life. You know, people trying to attack me, bicycles all of a sudden trying to run into me, all of that. So ocean water can also help you cleanse your energy field, by the way. Okay, in short, I think that's all I wanted to say on this topic. I hope it helps, and comment below if you have anything to add. Talk to you very soon. Bye, guys.